Hello my friends, I'm in Bilbao, the capital of the province of Basque in the Spanish Basque country. I love Txakoli. I've always loved the first sensation of this fizzy and mysterious dry white wine that accompanies like no other Spanish tapas, or pinchos as they call in the region. It was the wine of my teenager years, when slaloming from bar to bar in the evenings, irrigating our quick pieces of local cuisine with wine that splashes out of the glass when served from a height. Originated from home consumption, it has quickly gained the favor of wine lovers all around the world. And not only fizzy Txakoli is found here, there has been a profound transition into professionalism, and wines of modern styles that compete with the best wines in the world are also found here. Let's have a look at this amazing wine and the people and customs behind it, as it is going to surprise you. Until the 80s, Txakoli was mainly a homemade wine, drunk in the Basque country, Cantabria and Valle de Mena in Burgos, Castile. It is a wine style that could have been extinct due to several negative scenarios suffered by viticulture and winemaking in the middle to the end of the 19th century. With the exodus of population to the big metropolitan areas, the attack of phylloxera, and the lack of market for artisan wines. But we're talking about the Txakoli of the Basque country, and these are major words. Let me just remark the fact that the Basque country was difficult to conquer by foreign civilizations. Obviously, I don't picture Basque viticulturists scared of a little bug eating the roots of their vines. That was not going to stop them for sure. Since some Txakoli styles and regions in the Basque country managed to achieve DO status in the late 80s, its quality spread and adepts to this particular drink have only grown in the last decades. If you have not tried it yet, don't wait. Go to the store and get a bottle right away. I'm here with Inyaki Suarez, who is a sommelier here in País Vasco, an expert, very knowledgeable of the way wines are made in this area. And it's a pleasure being with him.
Thank you very much for receiving us and for all the help you have given us.
I would tell you that the presence of the vineyard in the Basque territory has an ancient character. It is true that the historical transit you've had, it's been like a little of a sawtooth. Depending on each period, there have been periods of more and better evolution and worse evolution. At the beginning of the century, to give you an idea, in Basque, we had around 25 hectares of vines. In Getaria, Guipúzcoa, around 20 hectares. Our territory is a territory in which that perfectly fits certain varieties, especially of Atlantic character. And culturally, it has always been associated in a complementary way, and also in a professional way, to that very social structure of ours, which is our caserío. To give you a piece of information, if we think, for example, of the term of the very concept of Txakoli, from its meaning to the term itself, Txakoli would be something like a wine interpreted as made home and for home. Made well, but for home consumption. From this traditional perspective, what we find is a connection of complement, of culture, where besides the apple trees, which we are also known for, we have also been territory of vineyards since very old.
In modern times, there are already denominations of origin, of which you have 3. In the Basque country, there are more places where Txakoli is made that are not denominations of origin outside of the Basque country, but above all, Txakoli is associated with the Basque country. They're quite recent, right?
Yes, in fact, the firstborn is the denomination Getariako Txakolina in the year 1989. The second would be Basque, which was born in the year 94. And the last would be Arabako Txakolina, which is the one established in 1998. In the end, they represent, so to speak, Enrique, 3 different personalities with a common identity, that is, Txakoli in capital letters.
We're here in Ocondo, and I'm with Xavier Abando, who is the owner of Bodega Sastavita here in the denomination of origin Álava of Txakoli.
Thank you very much for having us. Nice to be here. How are you? I'm going to ask you, because you have your winery in the background made of wood, which is like a recreation of what is the typical caserío of the Basque country, even with different zones differentiated, representing the different functions of the house.
The caserío was a place where people lived. It was their home. This is a cold place, and they had the animals in the same building. One part was for housing, and the other part was for the animals, where the animals lived, the animals' block. And above the block, many houses had rooms, because with the block, with the heat of the cattle, they heated the upper part of the house.
Of course, the news of your winery is that you have become one of the great wine pagos of Spain. That's big words.
They admitted us for the quality of the product, and we are delighted because they take us everywhere. Because we are the only Txakoli that exists as Gran Pago.
And what production you have?
We have a production of about 150,000 bottles at this moment.
Well, you are pioneers, that is, when it comes to the modernization of the traditional Txakoli to the modern times, with more sophistication, with more technology, more professional, right?
Yes, we have removed that sour Txakoli that there was, although many liked it. But for me, it is an impossible thing to drink. And we have made a Txakoli, well, very European, because they compare us a bit with the Rieslings.
Also produced in other regions of Spain, like Cantabria and Burgos, and even in Chile, Txakoli is mainly associated to the Basque country, in the very north end of Spain, touching the Atlantic Ocean. There are 3 different regulated denominations of origin for Txakoli in the Basque country, which corresponds to the 3 provinces of this outstanding and extremely welcome region of Spain. Txakoli from Getaria originated in the small region around the towns of Getaria, Zarauz, and Haya, in the province of Guipúzcoa. It is the most historical one and the first to obtain its DO certification in 1989. Txakoli from Biscay covers most of the Biscay province, with capital in Bilbao. This was the second Txakoli to receive DO status in 1994. And Txakoli from Álava, from the far northwestern end of the province. It is the youngest of the 3 Basque Txakoli DOs, having gained certification in 2000.
As I said before, we have 3 denominations of origin, we have 3 personalities, and an identity in common, which is Txakoli. From there, each appellation of origin has developed a regulation. Different stuff, not in terms of varieties. Our main varieties will always be Ondarrabi Zuri and the Ondarrabi Beltza, but in terms that can be derived towards density in terms of cultivation. Even models or terms of elaboration. Let's say there is a diversity that allows us to maintain a common denominator, which is what characterizes the Atlantic character of our wines, fresh wines. And from there, each denomination to structure depending on different criteria, different regulations.
You're also very open to the inclusion of varieties well known internationally, like Riesling or Chardonnay, and even Sauvignon Blanc. And besides, beauty is that you mix them with yours in some wines that we are going to try on visits to the wineries. This also gives you a bit of diversity and gain at the time of composing the wines.
From my point of view, it gives you greater diversity and perhaps a less dogmatic reading of what makes to interpret a wine territory. In the end, what determines our characteristics and our personality is a set of elements within which, obviously, our varieties are part of that identity seal. But we don't just interpret the weather, we interpret the soil. From this point of view, we, in all 3 denominations, always articulate 2 categories of varieties, those that are authorized and the ones that are recommended. The recommended ones will be those main grapes, as I told you before, the Ondarrabi Zuri and the Ondarrabi Beltza. And from there, for example, in the specific case of Biscay, there are a number of varieties that are authorized and with a use limited in percentage, which could be in this case today with the new regulations. Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, Petit Manseng, Grand Manseng.
That list varies from DO to DO, right? Not the same ones here than in Alaba, for example.
Here they have been working for some time with Petit Manseng and Grand Manseng, that is to say that in the end it is a kind of respect within the interpretation of the territory. Each denomination of origin does its reading, but always with a common factor of common denominator. What are we? We are Txakoli territory.
Alright, Iñaki, fantastic. Thanks for the explanations. Now we're going to take a walk through the wineries and taste the wines and see the vineyards. We are delighted to be here.
I am in Okondo, in the province of Alaba, to introduce the section where we will discuss the climate, the geology, and the soils of the regions in the Basque country where Txakoli is made. And we will relate it to the viticultural practices in the region. The climate for the different Txakoli denominations of origin varies mainly according to how far from the ocean they are. In general, the Txakoli vines of the DOs in the Basque country possess a mild Atlantic climate with high rainfall levels with up to 1,600 millimeters per annum and mild temperatures with minima down to 2 degrees centigrade in the winter and maxima around 35 in summer. This affects the acidity and aromatic intensity of Txakoli wines. This is particularly obvious in the Txakoli of Biscay and Getaira, where many of the plantings are within a few kilometers from the Cantabric Ocean, which is how locals call the coastal areas of the Atlantic Ocean. I'm here with Bingen Mendizabal, who is part of the responsible team of Bodega Sastavita here in Biscay. And hola Bingen, encantado, gracias por recibirme. ¿Cómo estás?
We have an important influence from the ocean nearby. We have the Cantabrian Sea and the Atlantic side by side. It cushions the cold a lot in the winter and the heat in the summer. In Biscay, we have an important microclimatic diversity because even if we have that sea, if we move a little further, a few kilometers from the sea, we have a rather abrupt orography with different altitudes. You can already see that Biscay is very different and makes us have small areas with weather conditions that can change in terms of warmer or cooler average temperatures as we go deeper or as we go up in altitude, or even changing our orientation. That gives us an important climatic diversity. We usually look for an orientation towards the south, southeast or southwest. We can say that the northern orientation may not be the most propitious because it's colder still, and that is a southeastern or southern orientation. We seek more hours of light and we look for more heat, which is interesting for our area.
I'm here in the vineyard of Bodega Sastavita and I'm with Álvaro Bujanda, who is the commercial director of the bodega.
Álvaro, thanks for being with us. How are you? I would like you to describe the climate for me.
Well, we find that Sastavita is part of the denomination of origin Arabaco-Txakolina. We are located in the Ayala Valley, in one of the languages very close to Salto del Nervión, and surrounded by mountains closely, about a few thousand meters high, including Ganekogorta, which is the highest mountain. The climate is mainly Atlantic, but we are about 22 to 25 kilometers from the coast, in the interior. The vineyards are oriented towards the south, and when we talk a bit about soils, our soils are characterized by an acidity that is rounder, not as aggressive as you can find in soils closer to the coast. In fact, this ring formed by these mountains gives a very special microclimate that characterizes our wines, that singularity and typicality of the wines to form part of the Grandes Pagos from Spain.
Hi, I'm in Getaria and I'm with Amaya Lizarta, who is the public relations of Bodegas Gainza here. It's a very traditional bodega in the Txakoli of Getaria.
Amaya, thank you very much for receiving us. How are you? We have a fantastic view of the ocean in the background. and a vineyard train in the shape of a para, which is a traditional way of training the vineyards in this area. But before talking about this, I want you to tell me a little bit about the climate of this area. We are so close to the sea that surely the influence is strong.
That's right. Well, we have a maritime climate. We don't have that much difference between winter and summer in terms of temperatures. And that also brings us good things in the winter, but not so good things in the summer. Let's say that it's very rainy and very humid in general.
The orography in all the Txakoli DOs is very irregular and characteristic of this very mountainous region. Most vineyards are planted facing south or southeast to benefit from increased exposure to sunlight and to protect the vines from storm, ocean winds and storms from the north. The soil varies between the different provinces, but is dominated by clay, sand and limestones covering the rocky nature of the subsoil. I'm here in Balmaceda with Alfredo Eguía, who is a viticulturist, a very special viticulturist who also makes his own wines, and we're going to be talking with him about very interesting things here regarding the Txakoli wines in the Basque country, in Biscay.
Alfredo, thank you for having us. How are you?
Very well, thank you. In most of Biscay, the subsoil is composed by, let's say, what has always been called here the cayula, which is a mix of shales and slates, easily breakable. The roots can penetrate through. In times of excess heat, they still retain the humidity necessary to not suffer.
That minerality is so characteristic of Txakoli. Maybe it comes from the roots entering through here.
I think so. This is quite important. What happens is that the best way to prolong reality is by working with methods with low intervention, which is how we really develop that character.
And on top of the cayula, what do you have?
Over the cayula, it is usually interspersed with sandstone rocks, and from there it is already living in soil which, specifically in this vineyard, contrary to the rest of Biscay, is usually soil with a clay loam texture. In this case, it is sandy loam. Sandy soils are, in my opinion, the best for viticulture in cases where there is humidity. It drains better, and then we have an environment that's drier and with less phytosanitary diseases because there is less humidity.
What soils are most characteristic of the Álava area?
We have calcareous clay above all, also some lean, and well, they have a fertile capacity of about 3 or 4 meters integrated into an extract at that level. Those 3 or 4 meters lie above fossils, fossilized shells, since in ancient times, in the Cretaceous period, this was an ocean. The wines that we can find here, they have a certain mineral character, not salty, but you do count that uniqueness of the soil.
Here in Aya, and I'm with Aitor Irazu, who is the owner of Bodegas Macatza.
Aitor, thanks for receiving us. The soils around here are a little peculiar. It is not so characteristic of the rest of the areas that we have been, because it is composed of a slate subsoil.
Yes, we have a slate soil, calcareous slate. For us, it is a great advantage because it is a soil that fragments.
It is easy to exfoliate.
Yes, it is easy. The organic level, what would be the first layer of the soil, it is a clay loam soil, but it is not very deep, and then immediately reaches the mineral subsoil, the slate. It is an advantage because the plant can easily penetrate down this level, and around here it explores a big volume of soil.
You can see it over there, right?
Yes, we have a vertical cut over there.
Up there you have the vineyard. This is one of the benches.
Yes, this will be the slate subsoil, the mother rock. As you can see, This is all loose. It fragments easily.
It depends, right? Where would the sod start?
Yes, it depends on where in the terrace we are. There are areas where it is 50 centimeters deep, in some areas a little more and in others even less.
I'm in the beautiful town of Getaria, in a tongue of land won to the ocean, to start a section where we will explore the viticultural practices and grapes employed in the elaboration of Txakoli. Viticulture in this area has many centuries of history and is very rooted to millenary customs of the region. Although it varies from zone to zone, perhaps the most traditional viticultural examples are vineyards trained in high trellis systems called paras in the Basque country, and most representative of Txakoli of Getaria. In this system, the vines are cultivated at greater height above ground, with the foliage forming a continuous canopy to improve the microclimate around the grape. However, other training systems are also used for Txakoli, including vertical trellising systems and even bunch vines in some cases.
You rely on biodynamic. Much of your crop is grown in biodynamic, which is going a little beyond ecology. In a dry climate like in Castilla, it may be easy. Perhaps here it's more difficult because of the humidity.
Well, yes, the truth is that it is very difficult. In fact, of the 4 hectares that I currently have, I don't have it all. I cannot transfer all at once to extricate biodynamic viticulture. We need to have a certain quantity of grapes to subsist. This is a slow process. Biodynamics and viticulture, where you do not apply synthetic products in such a rainy climate like the one we have, you have to pay a tribute to transit into biodynamic.
So you transit your vineyards into biodynamic, and the first year you have losses up to 60%, right?
Well, it's a manner of speaking. In the end, you can recover, and it depends on the year as well. But in principle, the losses will be 20, 30 or 40% minimum.
It catches my attention how you have trained the vine. You have this double trellis that open conically, which you explained before helps distribute the sunlight in a homogeneous way, making the grapes to grow in a particular way. Can you explain this?
Well, at the beginning, it was a normal trellis. But a few years ago, I transformed it into an open line system. The meaning is as follows. Noting that we are in a north-south orientation, what I'm looking for is a relationship in the best possible terms of leaf surface well exposed to sunlight per kilo of grapes. In this way, what we do is train the vine, instead of a double gale, in a quadruple gale, provided the vigour of the plant allows it. But in the end, what we got is a greater number of smaller clusters.
It is nice to say, but difficult to do.
Yes, because you need to prune on both sides. You need to separate the production. You have to harvest a larger number of smaller clusters. But hey, everything is in view of homogeneity in maturation.
Carrying the branch and the vine on a trellis will help us obtain a larger surface of exposition to sunlight. That will result on great leaf photosynthesis and a greater capacity for regeneration of polyphenols. We work the vineyards with a vegetal cover and minimum intervention on the ground to maintain the natural ecosystem of what is naturally in the vineyard. This vineyard is a Gran Pago of Spain, and what we want to express is the maximum value and the maximum expression of the soil and the concept of terroir that can give us these characteristics. We also work with minimum intervention, just a few treatments, only the minimum necessary in rainy seasons.
Here in Getaria, it makes more 500 years that we are known for the production of Txakoli. In past times, the best solution they found was to raise a vine in height so that it was away from all that is soil moisture. It's true that every job in the Poirot is still manual. It's impossible to mechanize the system in harvest or in pruning. When the vineyard is trained as a Poirot, what you want to achieve is that the grape is healthy and, of course, a quality grape. Right now, the winery has been around for many years and more than 10 working in an integrated agriculture. What we are trying is to go from a traditional agriculture with uncontrolled phytosanitary uses, which was like it was done before, where they produced much more to help nature, to work with nature, not to be so aggressive neither for the environment, nor for the vineyard itself, nor for the grapes that it will produce.
Well, here we have almost all in Parral, with only a few small areas with Espaldera, and I believe that it is the most appropriate for this area, because on the one hand, we are moving the plant away from the ground, from moisture, which may be contaminated. The soil here is always dangerous, especially those of us who work in organic with a vegetal cover. It is a way of being able to get rid of that humidity that generates the cover crop. On the other hand, being higher, it has more influence of the wind. The clusters of grapes are more aerated. There is also the advantage when doing treatments because the clusters are more exposed. We can go inside the Parral with a tractor, and with the atomizer from below, the grapes receive the treatments directly. That is crucial. If you look at the vineyard, well, which is a bit like a labyrinth, it is structured in terraces. I think this was almost a precipice. With the terraces you get a structure that allows you to work with a small tractor. We do not take long in doing the treatments. There are areas where you cannot turn. You have to come in forward and get out in reverse. And there are dangerous areas because in the end, when it rains, well, many times, especially when you move in reverse, you don't see the danger so clearly. And well, then yes, it is complicated, very complicated.
Besides, it's not just that you work here, but in a climate and with so much humidity, you are in conversion to organic. That conversion of 2 or 3 years according to the regulation.
Yes. Since the first year we took over this vineyard, we started in 2020, and we already knew that we were not going to have grapes because we dedicated to clean the vineyard, to clear, to prune. But we already started with organic treatments.
And in fact, you go beyond ecological because you are already operating in biodynamic, with a biodynamic philosophy, which is even more demanding.
To be able to certify as a biodynamic, you have to be ecological first, and you also have more restricted the uses of copper. But for us, it is essential. We want to be in biodynamic right after we get the ecological certification to get the biodynamic certification.
Txakoli is usually made from a number of autochthonous varieties, which are used and approved to a different extent by the different denominations of origin in the Basque country. The most characteristic varieties are Ondarabi Zuri and Ondarabi Zubizarratia or Petit Corbu, used for the white Txakoli, and Ondarabi Belza for the rosé and red Txakoli styles. Another popular white varieties for Le Blanc, known as Munemehatza in Guetaria and Bordeleza Zuri in Biscay. Petit Mansen and Grand Mansen are also used in the elaboration of Txakoli, which are called here Izquiriota Tipia and Izquiriota, respectively.
It's a bigger grain cluster, but it's a cluster in any case smaller than that of Ondarabi Zubizarratia. And instead, the Ondarabi Zubizarratia is a bigger cluster, but with smaller berries. Beyond the styles of the grape, here we look more for the profile of a plot, the weather, and the terroir. Let's say that we could plant the Ondarabi Zuri in Carif or in another warmer area, and the result was going to be completely different. This project was started by Garikoit Riot in the year 1989, who worked together with the Basque government to make a Massal section of the Ondarabi Zuri. And on the other hand, a side of the Basque government, with Atlantic grape varieties that could be interesting for our area.
Which ones are those?
Well, now we are working with Riesling, which has an interesting result for aging wines, and it gives a different point, and also the Petit Manseng.
The main grape in Guttaria Txakolina would be the Ondarabi Thuri. We have two varieties. The Ondarabi Thuri, which would be the white grape, and Ondarabi Belzer, which would be the red grape of the area. It's true that the production of the red grapes is quite smaller than the white ones, and therefore the Ondarabi Thuri is the main one planted.
You've always had maturation problems. That's why red wines are not famous here.
Exactly.
But you do make a rosé. Do you make it exclusively from Belza or a mix?
We use all the red grape production to put it in the rosé. But we mix it in a 50-50 blend with the white grapes.
Well, it seems that Ondarabi Thuri is a hybridization of the Vitis vinifera that arrive from the Mediterranean and the Makatzak, which is the Vitis sylvester.
Macazza, which is the name of your winery.
That's correct. This is not a grape enologically good for vinification. However, the Ondarabi Thuri is a hybrid, and that makes this variety so resistant to this climatology. Furthermore, in our case, we are lucky to have the entire vineyard in Piefranco. This means that, so to speak, this is Ondarabi Thuri of pure blood because it has its own roots. It is all intrinsic, and for us it is an advantage, because I think that in addition to have more resistance to disease and give us more health, also makes the grape to transit much more on the characteristics of the soil and the climate.
I am in Aya, a very characteristic viticultural town of the DO Txakoli of Guetaria, in the province of Guipúzcoa. From here we will start a journey to explore how Txakoli is made. Traditionally, Txakoli was made in giant wooden foeders, but they're being replaced by inert stainless steel vessels that allow a better control of the fermentation process. However, there is no one style of Txakoli. On the one hand, we find the Txakoli made in the traditional way and found almost everywhere in bars and restaurants in the Basque country, as well as in everyone's home. On the other hand, there is a modern Txakoli style as varied as the winemaking behind it, with examples fermented in oak or concrete vessels, left on the lees for extended periods of time, blended with Riesling and Chardonnay, or undergoing carbonic maceration. Yes, carbonic maceration of white grapes. Let's visit some of the wineries to see how it's made. I'm now with Edna Bernejo, who is also from the team responsible of the bodegas. Hola Edna, gracias por recibirnos.
Well, in the end we have the whole vineyard divided, even within the same plot, into microplots. This doesn't mean that they are different qualities, but that they have different characteristics of grapes to make wines with more aging, fresher wines, wines with more personality, and the little things that are more special for the top winery wines. For example, the artisar, small things that we already see in vineyard, and the grape that we like and that we don't want to lose, so we elaborate them separately.
You have monovarietals and also mixtures in the wines that you elaborate, I believe.
Yes, well, the variety is important, but for us it's secondary. We pay close attention to the terroir, to the soil, to the climate of each place, and to the concept of vintage. We find it beautiful. So with those things, those make our main terroir. And in the vintage, because every year it's nice that the wine taste is different, whether it comes from colder, warmer or drier years. And we play with all of that. We try to make wines personal using octothenous yeasts. There are some that spontaneously ferment. We make a wine that it's natural as possible, as with an orange wine, which spontaneously ferments with the skins.
One of them?
One in particular, a white carbonic maceration, and the wine is orange.
Edna, we are in the crianza room, and you make a diversity of crianza styles as well. Not only diversity in the vineyard, but in the production and aging. Can you explain it a little bit?
Well, once they have done the fermentation, depending on what your plot is or what the wine it is, to crianza go those that we want them from a specific vineyard plot. We have a project called Paradisuak, which would be wines from a single plot. We also give them a different crianza. Then the Artisar, which would be the wine that I mentioned before, that it always comes from a particular plot, that we see more character as it's made separately and undergoes crianza separately. For example, the Artisar 2017, which is the one that we are going to taste, been aged in 700-liter French oak barrels. And besides, this wine has something special that undergoes 15% brisado. A brisado is when white wine is made as if it were a red, that is, the grapes are crushed and then ferments with the skin and seeds, and acquires an orange hue.
With the grapes that are grown biodynamically, pressing goes with the whole bunch. This means that the stem is not removed, so it is a slower pressing where the stems themselves make, at times, a water filter. The must that arrives is hyper-oxidized, and we do not add any SO2.
Then they reach the barrel and there they stay.
And we just let the yeast do its job and make a spontaneous fermentation.
Spontaneous with its indigenous yeasts. How long do they take to ferment?
Usually, when the fermentation is made with indigenous yeast, which in our case accounts for 90% of the fermentation, it does most of it quickly in a couple of weeks. But then the small traces of sugars that you have left take over the winter to finish fermenting.
This is Rebel, that is 100% barrique. And you have another wine, the Izaki, that you mix part of biodynamic with another part that is not biodynamic and it has been processed and fermented in still.
Correct. Izaki, which means creature. Part of it goes in biodynamic and is processed like Rebel, but with grapes with a bit more production per vine. In Rebel, we are below a kilogram per vine. And for this, we are at a kilo and a half of production per vine, in another type of soil that's a little more fertile. The rest of the plot, which although is not biodynamic, the truth is that they receive very few treatments, and of course, without use of any type of herbicides. It also ferments spontaneously, but in stainless steel. We blend the two wines once they have been finished. The two phases will be separate for a whole year, and the blend is done right before bottling.
Well, I'm here now with Ana Martin, who is the enologist in the Bodega Sastavita.
Ana, thanks for receiving us.
Pleased to meet you.
I'd like you to tell us a bit about the elaboration that you have of your different styles of wine, starting with the Rabbit Suri, your base white Txakoli that you do in still.
What we do for Sastavita white is an elaboration like a traditional white, because it's elaborated in stainless steel with controlled temperature that is clarified, stabilized, and released on the market. We have the Sastavita Rosé with little quantities because we don't have a lot of grape, because that is done with Ondurabi Balza. These are out entry wines. Then we have the Malcoa wines. For this you see that we are here with some concreter eggs that we started in 2015.
And you were pioneers in the area.
Yes, indeed. Now that has spread a lot. We are looking for something that was a crianza, of course, but that it didn't provide wood. So the concept of this wine is that it passes at least 18 months in egg. Yes, with lees. At first, we do batonnage. From time to time we move it, but then intrinsically, by the form of the egg, there is a movement of the lees. Malcoa is a wine made with the best and oldest grapes of our state.
And then the Malcoa Reserva.
2 years ago, we wanted to get something out, even a little more special, to demonstrate that the Txakoli wines have life. This was a bit of a challenge, because it was always thought that Txakoli was for young wines, but it can live as a Riesling. I would say even better. It may not have the same aroma as Riesling has, but it has other structural characteristics, like body.
You put that one in a barrel, right?
After taking it from the egg, it spends a few months in the barrels. but we use large barrels, 400 and 500 liters, and used.
We are in the elaboration room of Txakoli, in front of a barrique. But the process does not start here, it starts in stainless steel. Some of your wines end here, but let's start with the fermentation process. How do you manage to preserve the carbonic in your wines?
Well, what we do is fermenting in stainless steel from yeast of a pie de cuba, always indigenous yeasts. And what we do by the end of fermentation is close the tank so that carbon dioxide is captured to gradually integrate into the wine itself. When the fermentation ends, we cool it down because carbonic solubility is greater at low temperatures, and then we do reductive enology. That is to say that the wine moves as little as possible so that the carbonic does not come off the wine. For us, it's a natural side effect of the reductive enology that we do to maintain our goal of making natural wines. Note that to be able to make natural wines, we move the wines the minimum and perform a good management of oxygen. We do this to avoid the danger of uncontrolled oxidation, and somehow we approach that traditional character of the Txakoli of Getaria.
In some of your wines, well, 2 of them go to barrique, and then you do batonnage to make the lees to be in contact with wine. What do you gain with that?
The lees have a reductive power, which also adds to the process of making a natural wine. The lees are the dead yeasts that, as they die, they decompose and release substances called manoproteins. That what they do is provide unctuous substances, making the wine softer, unctuous, and with more volume.
Here now with Joseba Lazcano, who is a family owner of Bodega Sastavita, and we're going to discuss with him the elaboration of their Txakoli style scene. Hola Joseba.
¿Qué tal?
We are in front of a deposit where you have the Txakoli, which is almost done, because this is the Txakoli that you make from the last harvest.
Yes, that is this year, the 2022 harvest.
We are in December and the Txakoli is already made, pretty much done.
It will be out in a month. To begin with, Txakoli is a young wine. Then everything is collected manually. We have 6 little tractors and the grapes are brought quickly and are pressed on the same day. Okay, after destemming and pressing, the clean must be brought here and the fermentation begins. Txakoli fermentation is done at 14 to 15 degrees, simulating the temperature from when our grandfathers made it. They are usually harvested in October, and the fermentation occurs naturally over November and December, in barrels exposed to the cold temperatures of the north. So it is a slow, careful fermentation. We lose fewer aromatic precursors in the process, and the yeast, when it eats the sugar and before it turns it into alcohol, that carbonic, which generates a tiny part at that temperature, stays dissolved in the wine. Getariako Txakolina is the oldest denomination of origin of Txakoli, and therefore it is the most traditional and is embedded into the culture. And one thing we preserve is the escanciado. This is because we are close to many cider houses, and cider and Txakoli here in Gipuzkoa has had the same influence and similarities, and one of them is the escanciado. We call the opening of the tap choch. Look, you have to put the glass more or less at this point, and I will open it. And when the glass is more or less half full or less than that, you take your glass and I fill the next, so that we don't lose a drop. Are you ready?
Okay, ready.
Va.
Ya. Muy bien.
Así
Fíjate,
es.
¿eh? Bueno,
Bueno,
cheers.
Osasuna.
Now that we know the history, geography, climate, grapes and elaboration methods of Txakoli, let's try it and enjoy the rich aromatic and structural sensations of this wine. Whether you want to serve it from a height to reduce the carbonic, to help visualizing the fizzy nature of some of them, or drink it quietly to get the carbonic explosion manifest in the mouth, or perhaps taste those modern styles with no carbonic at all, there is a glass for everyone. We will try some of the best examples of Txakoli, of the DOs of Getaria, Biscay and Álava, and we will do it by the hand of their makers. We will also try some of the most characteristic cuisine of the area in one of the most celebrated restaurants of the Basque country, right here in San Sebastián, Donosti, where they have one of the largest wine cellars in Spain. Come with us.
The first wine we are going to try is 7, number 7. The number 7 has a lot of relevance in the Basque country, 7 provinces, and it's a mystical number too, which says many things. 7 is a wine we started making in 2003. Until then, very few or no wines with this kind of elaboration were in the DO.
What varieties?
Here we have Ondarabisuri and the Ondarabisuri Serratia, with more or less 40% each, and a little bit of Riesling. In order for you to see the evolution potential that a Txakoli can achieve, we're going to try a 2015 vintage.
In this case, we have some touches of citric in character, citrus peel, a floral character that accompanies, above all, towards a sequence of linden blossom.
The truth is that it's very complex, dramatically complex, and it evolves with time. Since we started to now, it has already changed the profile.
This particular cup has a shape that enables the amplitude of the wine very well. It makes the wine to travel, not to be static, but increasing permanently and in a friendly way. Let's try it in the mouth. It has a clear expression. It has an attack that we would call tremendously friendly, almost a silky cut. It spreads into the whole mouth and marks 2 nuances, from my point of view, fundamental. The first, a denominator characteristic of the wines of this territory, which is the freshness, and a hint that begins to occur with wines of Guarda, with this variety, the Ondarabisuri, which brings us to that point of ripe citrus hints, sometimes even reminding us of kerosene.
Well, let's go with the last wine. This is Artisar. Artisar is the reference of the winery. Artisar means Venus. It's like the star in the sky for the reference. For a sailor, it's the first star that appears at nightfall. And well, for us, it is also our reference. How do we translate that into our concept? What we look for is excellence. In other words, it is not produced every year. We need to see something special. These are grapes from very small clusters, of very small production, which enables a lot of extraction and that they have a very good maturation.
The first attack is of a medium intensity, medium high, and the wonder of the journey that the artist usually makes, and that in this case it is expressed to us in a direct way, transcending of the primary aromas of white fruit, and starting with hints of stone fruit, and ripe citrus, with an insinuation of kerosene and complex notes that appear little by little, with a slightly spicy character. It is a silky wine, less greasy than in any of the previous wines, and astringency that relates to rounded tannins, well integrated within the wine. Suddenly, they appear to me things that didn't appear before. I feel like forest and citric notes again. These are ripen and spicy notes.
If you let me define it in one word, I would say that it has presence, from the beginning to the end. I really love this wine. Hey, with this wine we're gonna say goodbye. Bingen, thanks a lot for welcoming and for these spectacular wines. A pleasure being with you.
Izaki, which in Euskera means creature, is actually a creature because it's a little spawn in which 40% of its origin is 100% dynamic grapes, and the other 60% is the same type of grape that I have not yet brought to 100% biodynamic. The biodynamic part, as I mentioned before, is processed with whole grapes. The must is oxidized without any type of sulfurous addition. We let it ferment spontaneously with its indigenous yeast, while the part that does not come from biodynamic, instead of barrique, the fermentation is done in stainless steel. Each one goes its own way, and finally, the following year is when the assembly is done. In fact, this is an assembly still made in deposit. The blend is not done yet. I'll do it at the end of this week. 100% Petit Corbu or Ondarabi Suri. Fundamentally, we look for wines with no intervention to demonstrate the terroir from which they come with all its microbiology. I am more interested in the mineral aspects than in primary fruit aromas. These are the aromas that have to do with the ground and with the landscape. Well, in the mouth, even though they are wines that complete the malolactic conversion, as they already come from a wine with a powerful acid structure because it is an Atlantic wine, it still has a vibrant acidity. But it is also an ample wine, salty. It seems as if you are eating salted popcorn. These are mineral aromas that, above all, leave a lot of life in the mouth.
What would you drink it with?
I think this is quite versatile, but I still like them, especially this one, which still holds very firm acidity, with oily fish, in general. That was Izaki 2021, this is Rebel 2020. That one is still in deposit. This one already has a few months in the bottle, as it is from a previous year. At first, one might even think that it is going to be a sweet wine, aromatic. It reminds me of a Joransen style, but of course, sweet is an aroma that cannot be smelled, but it is an induction that we make mentally. When you taste it, you say, no, it is a totally dry wine, but it is a wine from a very ripe grape, with a very complete ripening, and on the palate, well, it is a wine that fills your mouth.
It has slightly finer aromas.
Notes of ripened fruit, ripe quince, like candy indeed. This is a wine that displays very clearly the vintage and the difference between cold and warm vintages, changing its expression accordingly. It has a common background, very organic and natural, also mineral, but in this vintage the notes are even marmalade.
It does have a good journey in the mouth. It enters belly elegant, very fine, and travels pretty clean. And then you have that final afterstate that reminds you of the wine all the time.
Being able to make wine without any type of additive, the fear that winemakers always have first, since we do not use anything sulfurous, the fear is that the wine will have deviations and defects, and it is about having confidence in what one is doing. Confidence in everything, in the vineyard, in the soil, in the microbiology. In the end, absolutely nothing happens to the wine, and the aromatics and the expression it gives you would never get using SO2.
Alright, Alfredo, thank you very much for having us and for teaching us your way of understanding viticulture and wine elaboration. These wines are fantastic, so I wish you good luck in the future.
Thank you very much.
Alright, let's taste your wines. We are going to start with the Sastavita, right?
It is the most representative of the winery. It is lemon color, crystalline, with clear tones. Here we quickly begin to notice, on the one hand, all that freshness, that humidity that is identified here in this valley. Some citrus notes, and some stone fruit, and grapefruit, pineapple, slightly banana, balsamic notes, a little minty at times. Here we notice the essence of the variety Ondarabi Zuri, and the acidity of this area marked and round, but at the same time giving you a certain sumptuousness and roundness with volume, and the most important thing is that it makes you salivate. This is a wine for everyday use, for daily menus. This second wine is Malkoa, which means tear in Euskera. It is an author wine of great expression and very gastronomic, focused on high cuisine and very demanding palates. Besides, the color is already giving us information that it has undergone a natural aging process. With the concrete eggs, it becomes more complex, with clear balsamic notes, with mint notes and lemon. This wine just needs to be allowed to rest a bit in the mouth. What you are feeling is the work of the lees, making the wine very round, very thick. Here we are enjoying what is a great wine, of the maximum expression of the Ondarrabizuri aging in concrete eggs.
Very good, Alvaro. Thanks for having received us, shown us these beautiful vineyards here in Alaba, and let us try your range of wines that are all spectacular. You have a good variety of styles.
Thank you very much, Enrique.
We are in a restaurant called Recondo here in San Sebastián, Donostia, and we're going to try some of the characteristic cuisine of this area. This is a very well-known restaurant, and they have a really impressive cellar that they're also going to show us. Come with us. I'm here with Alejandro Hernandez, who is perhaps the luckiest sommelier in the world because he works in Restaurante Recondo, who has they have a really impressive collection of wine.
Alejandro, thanks for having us. How are you?
A pleasure.
The cellar is impressive. Tell me a bit about the philosophy behind it, how it was born and why it has come to have so many bottles.
The philosophy, born with a person, Chomin Recondo. Chomin Recondo opened the restaurant in 1964. It started as a bar. It started around the 70s, and it was when that passion for wine began to evolve, especially through proximity, Rioja, also due to its proximity to Bordeaux. Frankly, his passion was Burgundy.
We're talking about 65,000 bottles, many of which are available to the customer who comes to eat.
There are a small percentage that are not available on the menu as they are in a resting phase. It is in a phase in which Chomin thinks that wine is still not for consumption, not for commercial use.
Of course, what seems special to me in a restaurant with this type of cellar is not only the diversity to pair with food of different styles, and you have a chef who is also great, but also because you can pair with different vintages, because you can pull from a winery up to 40, 50 years ago.
If, for example, as I have mentioned before, we have all the Mouton Rothschild's vintages from the year 1945, you see, for example, the number of wines we have, the historic collections, and above all, for example, as we have seen, from Vega Sicilia.
Well, thank you very much for showing us the cellar. Now we're gonna try a dish.
Thank you, you will enjoy it.
All right, I'm here with Inyaki Arrieta, who is the chef of Restaurante Recondo, and he's going to explain us a very typical plate of Donostia.
Inyaki, thanks for receiving us. How are you?
Well, very good. Thank you for coming.
You have brought here a plate that looks spectacular. How do you call it?
This is chamorro donostiara or chamorro from San Sebastian. It is a very typical dish. It actually carries the name of Donosti. It is a very typical dish of San Sebastian, as we have the sea in front of us. We live in front of the sea. This is a typical dish here precisely for this reason, for the crabs, the big spider crabs that we have on our coasts.
How did you make it? What kind of preparation does it have?
The chamorros arrive alive, so we boil them slowly, with lots of patience. Then you take all the meat out, and then it is prepared with tomato, American sauce, cognac, and fried, until we obtain what you see here.
This documentary is about Txakoli. Is this a good pairing?
A perfect pairing. A good Txakoli, which is also done on the Basque coast, goes very well with this dish, also from the Basque coast.
Very well. I'm gonna try it a little bit, if you don't mind, because it looks fantastic. No, so good. It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Inyaki.
You're welcome.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a...
Well, here we are to try the wines. I wouldn't have come otherwise.
In our family winery, we make 3 wines. We will start with our classic Txakoli, the one of a lifetime, the Gainza Txakolina. We do the escanciado a bit. We serve a little, like this, up high. Its colour is quite pale, very transparent when pouring. Well, it leaves a few bubbles. Yes, natural bubbles that little by little are disappearing. It has a medium expression, but it is very fruity, green fruit with a lot of apple reminiscence. Also because of that acidity that Txakoli has. A nice and light entrance, and it opens right away. There is an explosion of freshness, fruit. Acidity appears in the background. Good, it opens the mouth wide. It has hardly any residual sugars, as we leave the fermentations to finish on their own. A dry finish with a nice aftertaste, a bit salty.
I was going to say that I can feel this saltiness and a little bitterness as well, not much, but above all saltiness.
It can be paired with fish, grilled fish, with seafood, of course. They also go very well with rice, very well. And finally, we move to our rosé, a very, very small production called Gainza Roses. It has a light tint to it, but it would be a bit of an onion skin. It brings memories of Provence, for example, since there are slightly sweeter notes of red fruit with some stone fruit. This is already much more pleasant, with notes of red fruits, with good entrance and a good travel. Well, very appetizing. And this, for example, goes well with a good croquette, or like with pasta. It's going to be great with pasta. It's great, very good.
Well, thank you very much to you and Amaya for showing us your winery, your vineyards, your way of doing and being, and for letting us try your wines.
Thank you very much. Our doors are open for you.
We are in the most important moment of the day, which is to taste the wines. We start with Sorkin, right?
Well, Sorkin is a wine that carries the name of the vineyard where we have been. It's called Sorkin Chulo, the plot where we have been. That means witch's lair. It is a wine that is made in stainless steel tanks, and we elaborate it naturally. We make it without sulfurous, without filtering, without clarifying, without any addition. We control the temperature of fermentation and do not allow it to undergo malolactic fermentation. We try to keep the residual carbonic from fermentation. The truth is that, although the Ondarrabizuri is a variety with a somehow austere nose, it is actually a very fine nose, with menthol notes and some fennel. It has a residual carbonic touch that I think is very subtle. Somehow we would be in a profile which could be said to be a classic of Txakoli, for those reminiscences of the carbonic. It is a wine that has acidity, a very acid entry into the mouth, but that is accompanied by a volume, a structure. We also found salinity. I think it is a wine that represents very well the soil which you have seen in the vineyard, the slate. This is next, Narasti. We have lots of reptiles in the Basque country. Narasti means reptile, which is a metaphor for the wine. What reptiles do is change the skin to grow up, And this wine came in that sense because it is the first that made the malolactic fermentation, which is like removing the skin of a traditional Txakoli to grow into a different wine. To evolve, to say it in a different way. This has 30% in oak barrels, and the rest is made in stainless steel. It has been with its lees for 8 months, and perhaps the change more important is that it has made the malolactic fermentation, so we have a wine with greater complexity on the nose. As it opens up, it will express itself more. And then, in the mouth, it has a creamier, oilier profile. We are tasting also an unfiltered, unclarified wine without sulfurous, but I think it's a very precise wine. It does not have any type of deviation. It also has an entry with good acidity, but it is more modulated than in the previous one. It is more accompanied, and I think it's a longer wine.
All right, Aitor, thank you very much for showing us your vineyards and let us taste your wine. It's a pleasure.
We say goodbye to the Txakoli regions from the emblematic capital of Guipúzcoa, Donosti, San Sebastián. I am in the famous beach of La Concha, in the heart of the city. This trip has been extremely pleasant and informative. If you did not know much about Txakoli, I hope that this documentary has helped you to become interested in this fantastic wine. I strongly encourage you to pay a visit to this outstanding region. You will drink and eat like in no other place. Cheers!